Well, let's talk about Macau today. We've run into a bump in the road revenue-wise. A lot of problems in the VIP junket area. What's happening? A lot of people have different views of that. From your viewpoint, what's happening there now?
Well, my view is that everything that I've seen happen in the last 13 years, when I first was exposed to Macau, is cyclical. Mm-hmm. It comes and it goes. It's like gambling. You start off at a baseline. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Because sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. It's cyclical. Everything that happened there, for instance, when they limited the number of times somebody, a Chinese citizen, could go to Macau, first they said you can only go once a month, and once every 2 months, then once every 3 months, but they never announced it. Mm-hmm. And they never announced that it was over.
Right. So you think we're at the end of this difficult period?
I think the players that want to stay below the radar, mm-hmm. that don't want to show up there, whether they're corrupt or not, they just don't want to. There's a lot of money involved, and they don't want to send a message to the government that they may be corrupt.
Okay.
They don't want to be seen.
Okay, great.
So I think it'll take a couple more months before people feel a little more comfortable, and they'll come and play more.
And people are still ignoring, however, that the mass market is growing very strongly in Macau.
Well, what irritates me a little bit is how people look only at the short term. Mm-hmm. When my friend Steve once said, I don't want to be judged on a quarter-to-quarter basis. I mean, this is a long-term investment. And you can't judge. They're getting down to, they're talking about win in MOP per day for the last week. Mm-hmm. Pretty soon they're going to talk about MOP win or loss per hour.
Right.
Then they'll have a reader board up and it'll show how much is win or loss per minute. So this is all ridiculous. You're in business for
the long term.
For the long term. We've spent 9 or 10 or 11 billion dollars, but who's counting? And in Macau, and we're under construction with another property, and I've asked for permission to do yet another one, non-gaming, mm-hmm. without tables. I think that I didn't invest that kind of money just so that I could have the next week or 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. I invested that money over the long term. I don't think that the cultural practices, the cultural mores of Asian people is going to change. It's been happening for thousands of years. And I don't think it's going to change. And if the shortfall right now is cyclical, it'll come right back. I can't imagine, even if they didn't make the recent announcement, that it would last another 6 or 8 months.
Okay, great. Let's talk about Singapore.
The mass market is growing. Mm-hmm. The Chinese government has spent tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, U.S. equivalent, to build transportation infrastructure, and they're coming through with high-speed trains that are bringing. We've gone to the outer reaches of Guangdong province, to the nearer reaches of the adjacent province, and now we're penetrating those provinces with this very high-speed, very costly transportation infrastructure. Now, when the bridge gets finished in less than 24 months, the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, Macau, interestingly, will have another ready-made airport, which will be almost as fast to get in and out of Macau as it is with the Macau airport. So if you get out of the Hong Kong airport and you turn one way, 20 minutes you're in Macau. If you turn the other way, it's 45 minutes to drive downtown, usually through a little bit of traffic at least, to get to Hong Kong Island. So you're going to ask yourself, do I want to go to Hong Kong Island? Or can I just go to Macau and go to my convention, or go and have a good time with leisure tourism and gaming thrown in? So we are going to have another airport that services 100 commercial airlines, servicing 180 cities. was servicing 50 some odd million people in and out for a year. So with that and that additional infrastructure, that air transportation, the ground transportation, the government the PRC is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on, it's just going to reach further and further into the eastern part of China. And as we do, these people will come, knowing they can't come every Monday and Thursday. They'll come once in 3 months or 6 months or maybe once a year, but they're going to bring a much higher gaming budget with them. So this will feed into the premium mass and into the VIP markets.
And of course, the fact analysts still ignore is that we penetrated, Macau has penetrated only about 1% of the Chinese market so far.
I think the figure's 2 or a little over 2. But that's if you consider that all of the visitation comes only once a year.
Right.
Now we know that's not true.
Right, no question. Well, let's talk about Singapore. They call it an integrated resort there. You were one of the bidders. You won out, and the property you put out there.
I got lucky.
The property you put up there is simply spectacular. It's one of the most iconic buildings in the world. I remember being in Mike Levin's office the day they were raising the platform to the top, and he was a little bit nervous that day, but
I was there.
Yes, that's right.
I was going to sit on it, like in the movie, the guy that sat on the bomb and he rode the bomb all the way. I was going to ride the bridge, the span all the way up to the top.
Or maybe when Steve sat on top of his building in the beginning, right?
I was thinking about that the other day. I had to say he must have had a hell of a nerve to do that.
So why did you build something so iconic?
Good thing his wife liked him. She could have either cut the rope or gave him a push.
Why did you build something so iconic? Why didn't you just recreate a Venetian in Singapore?
Well, the competition had sort of an architectural component to it. They said that like 20 or 30% of the decision was going to be made on the architecture. But we had an architect, Moshe Safdie, that is brilliant and does things somewhat iconic. And when he came up with that, actually the bridge on the top level, the Sky Park, wasn't in his original idea.
Really?
No. But after we finished the design and I had to give final approval to it, I told him he didn't have a swimming pool. He said, well, tell you the truth, you don't really need a swimming pool. He said, besides, I don't have any place to put it. We used up all the land. I said, put it on the roof. Of course, there are hotels with swimming pools on the roof. He said, oh, that's a good idea. Now, I didn't ask him to build the whole Sky Park. He said, but if you got 3 buildings, I said, well, maybe you could, if you take the top floor and we send elevators up the outside 2 buildings, put the pool in the middle, and they can walk over a pedestrian walkway between the buildings. I don't think he's going to build what he did. So he did that, and it turned out to be the best. And I do believe in iconic buildings, that when we're competing with other people that have very good buildings, I saw the design in some publication of MGM's proposal for Osaka, a beautiful design. Could it be considered iconic? To me, iconic is like the Opera House in Sydney, Australia, where if you looked at the picture, you know exactly the city in which it's located. That's an iconic building. So all of our presentations for future locations and emerging markets will be iconic buildings. It's kind of like when young architects come out of school and they get a job at the architectural firm, and they, in their interview, or once they're accepted, the architect, the boy or girl, will take a design out of their back pocket or out of the girl's pocketbook and say, hey boss, I've been dreaming about this while I've been in architecture school. I want to show you the building that's going to be the greatest building that we could ever do here. And then he shows it to the boss. Boss looks around for the round file cabinet. And he takes it and he throws it over into the round cabinet. And he says, well, nobody's going to buy that. So, I mean, that's a beautiful building, but it's iconic. You know what I mean? It's iconic. Only universities and museums can afford to build an iconic building. And only somebody as crazy and as risk-taking as Sheldon Adelson would build an iconic building for the billions of dollars it'll cost, because it wins the day. So it's one thing to compete with all the other hotels here on the Strip, and it's another thing to have an individual iconic building and offer this to an emerging market. And when I'm looking at the mayors and the governors and whoever I'm talking to in the government, I sort of hint, I said, you know, your grandchildren will say to their cohorts in school, my daddy was the mayor and he's responsible for building that building. That's what your grandchildren will say. Well, they haven't said that yet, but I expect them to.
Let's talk about this country for a few minutes. On the Las Vegas Strip, a large majority of its revenues now comes from the non-gaming amenities. Do you believe this is something that casino destinations all across the country should strive for now, particularly in view of the increasing competition in all the jurisdictions in the U.S.?
We should what?
Should
I was thinking about the answer before you finished the question. And I missed the question.
Should the casinos in the United States concentrate more on creating non-gaming amenities to attract non-gaming customers?
Yes.
And what amenities do you think
It's clear. You've got to scale it down. We did this in Bethlehem.
Right.
We took an integrated resort business model and we scaled it down. Mm-hmm. It's scalable, but only to a certain extent. Because these meeting rooms, if we're going to be a MICE-based marketing strategy, we've got to have so many square foot of meeting room to so many free sleeping.
Right.
So you got to build. You just can't say, well, I'm going to be in what's called in Asia, MICE, meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions. You can't say, well, I'm building a property that's going to specialize in MICE and build 10 meeting rooms. You know, I'm making a proposal for a building 500 meeting rooms. When I came up with my idea that I couldn't finally get the Spanish government to agree to, I got one of the three governments in Spain to agree to it. But then the EU wouldn't have done it. I was going to build 2,400 meeting rooms. That would have been the convention capital of the world. Mm-hmm. But wherever we build, anywhere else, just I believe in the MICE business.
Right. But there has to be a gaming component to support that.
That's right.
That
you lose money operating places like this. You can't pay back the money just running exhibition convention centers, like charging a little more in a hotel room. Mm-hmm. You got to have something to subsidize it. There are various parts of an integrated resort that will lose money, like the museums, like the arenas, like the exhibition centers, like the Congress Center. We call this, that's a European term, Congress Center. Meetings and ballrooms. You can't make money on that, but you need a subsidy to put up enough critical mass to make it to make it what you're trying to make it.